go on and tell you more about my dad right now, but my brother's going to come in because he's the prime of this story. Well, that's what this is, right? Because Ham has other children. Canaan's the youngest, as we decipher this down, and these other men have children. So it's interesting. He just pulls Canaan in. Well, verse 22, he mentions them again. I think it's 22, right? Ham, the father of Canaan, it's mentioned there, and then we'll get to 25 eventually. So it's just an introduction, but it's because we're setting up Canaan in the future in this prophecy that's going to come. So, but notice what it says there in verse. From these the whole earth was populated. Let that sink in just a little bit. We eventually trace back to Noah and his 3 sons. Because the whole earth was populated from this point on. Right? The earth's been cleansed, and now we're going to be fruitful and multiply as the command was given them. And it's committed right here through the whole earth was populated. And why is this so important to our faith? Because in your textbooks that your children read in school and other places, there's going to be a little humanity popping up here, humanity popping up there. That little cell, that one micro had a success of the billions of trillions of odds against it, but it succeeded over here, it succeeded over there, and humanity is just popping up here and there. Right here from the Bible, it says that we go right back to Noah and his 3 sons. And of course to Adam, right, when you connect it back. Now I haven't studied this, I'm just taking gossip's word. I'm just going to share gossip with you. And I hate to do that right here in front of the world in Bible class. But they're really finding, as they trace and get more intelligent and research with DNA, it's going like this. And it's getting smaller and smaller, starting to point toward one man. And so, again, I haven't studied it through my own, so I'm just sharing information that I've studied and read. But it would appear, once again, the Bible is right. Isn't that amazing? So, the whole earth populated from these 3. And so, keep that in mind. That's a faith builder, and it's for conversation with you. If you need a text, right? Well, here's what God said about how the whole earth was populated. It didn't just start popping up in humanity here and there and everywhere. And when we get to chapter 10, which we've already covered, you'll see how they were distributed. And chapter 11 reflects back to chapter 10. All right, comments on that? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, on that, they actually, in the DNA field, they refer to the mitochondrial Eve as
right. And so it's pointing back to one woman. And like we studied earlier, right? All things, living things were created through Eve, right? They came through Eve, as the Genesis reported earlier. I don't remember what chapter, so I won't throw it. I think it was chapter 4, but I'm not positive. Right, thank you. All right. So let's go to the next section of passage here. Now, we have pre-flood, and now we have post-flood. Pre-flood, we had this beautiful picture, right? Adam and Eve walking in the Garden of Eden, a reflection back to heaven as the relationship and walking with God, and then sin coming in corrupted. Now we have the earth flushed, all the sin of the evil, thinking in every mind it's gone, and here's humanity left to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth in the image of God, that He can be glorified. And then we have this. It just shows you our nature. It shows you why we need a loving God and a sacrifice from His Son, Jesus Christ. A blood to wash away our sins. And it begins again. So let's take this in. Genesis chapter 9. Let's take a reading. Verses 20 through 23. If we take a good reader, I'll follow along.
And Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. And then he drank of the wine and was drunk, and he became uncovered in his tent. Through what verse? I'm sorry.
Through 23, please.
Okay. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his brother outside. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it both on their shoulders and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness.
Very good. Thank you, Robin. Good reader. Well, so Noah became a farmer. There's no surprise in that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very understanding, right? It had a prophecy that the earth would change and it'd be easier to till the ground because of him back to it. That's what his father named him Noah. Genesis 5:29. And so in that farming, he also included growing fruit of the vine and the grapes. And at some point, now this is years later, they didn't just walk off the ark and the next year he had a vineyard. We got children and grandchildren now in this case. And so we don't know the time frame, but years later this event's happening. So this isn't like, man, I finally got relief from the ark. I need to go on a drunken stupor kind of thing. And we don't know. I'll mention this real briefly. It just says that Noah drank the wine and got drunk. We don't know if this is his first time, right? This is the only incident we have recorded for him. Or if it's something that he knew would happen in drinking this fruit of the vine. And so, but either way it happened. And the context indicates that he knew it was going to happen if you read it thoroughly. And so we have this drunkenness. And so we see this just, not disgrace, but he disgraces himself. That's what drunkenness does. And then we see his son disgracing him. So that's the event that's happening here in this section. So he disgraces himself by putting himself in this vulnerable position. And then we see his son disgracing him, not respecting the authority of the parents. Now I can't help but wonder if Solomon didn't have in mind when he wrote Proverbs in this section here, 23. Please turn there. Reflecting back on Noah. But there's been a lot of other incidents recorded about drunkenness as we look back. This is the first mention of drunkenness, but it's not long again. It's related in, I believe, Genesis 15. I might be off on my verse, but no, it isn't 15. But so Lot's daughters are like, there's no one left on the earth for us to have children. We need to get our dad drunk and let him have his way with us so that we can bear children and carry on our family's name. And that involved, again, that's the second time. So you see, it's not a pretty thing. But let's read this real quick. This is not the focus, by the way. The focus is the disrespect to the parents. That's the focus of this passage. But it's worth mentioning while we're here that Noah found himself drunk and put himself in this disrespectful position. So what happens? And I don't know what the percentage is, and I do not want to raise the hands, but I know there's people in here that have been drunk. And you can relate to this. And there's also people in here that's been around drunks. And so you'll be able to relate to this. And tell me if this just isn't true. So let's read this. Proverbs chapter 23, let's begin at verse 29.
Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last it bites like a serpent, and it stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Through what? Yeah, through 33.
Yes, good. Thank you. Good reading. Yeah, man. Who has woe? The drunk. Woe is me, right? I don't know if you know this or not, but it depends on what you're getting drunk with and diluted with, how it affects the brain cells. Sometimes it's an emotional sorrow. Woe is me. Sometimes it's a happy. You hear it, right? Oh, he's a happy drunk, right? I don't know what phrases you know. I know a lot about drunks. And so all this is so true. Woe is me. And because of my drunkenness, I brought on a lot of woe. And I'm in sorrow. And then there's the fighting drunk, right? Contentions all the time. They get enough bravery in them, they're ready to take on the whole bar, as you see in the fight scenes in the movies and whatever. Who has complaints, right? Who has wounds without cause? Wake up out of their stupor the next day, bloody arms and head and nose. Did I get in a fight? Did people just beating up on me? What happened? Right? These are real. This is real stuff. And again, if you've ever been drunk, you've been around drunks, you know this thing. And then redness of the eyes, you can just see the bloodshot, right? And this is any drug. It doesn't necessarily have to be people. But so you get the point here. And that's why drunkenness is totally a sin. Galatians 5:21, the drunkards will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. And so the men had this wonderful Bible study a few weeks ago, and this was the topic. And I'll just throw this out there. you don't want to be associated with this in any way from the beginning, because you don't know where the end leads. Well, you do know where the end leads. You can see where the end leads. And it's over and over and over again in God's Word. And so, again, that wasn't the emphasis. But I will take a comment, but I don't want to spend the whole class here. So, JC, yes?
There was a deceptiveness to it too, though. People take that first drink and they go into being an alcoholic and they want to admit they are. They don't think they are. You can't solve a problem that you don't admit.
No, and that's exactly right. So with all these situations, you can't solve a problem you won't admit to. And it's not, I took that drink, now I'm drunk. There's a process. And there are people that will continue that path once they take that first drink. So it's best never to take that first drink or that first drug, whatever the case is. And that's a great point. And we're here to help them, right? This whole chapter is about helping humanity. That was the mission given to Noah. Be fruitful, multiply, go out and make sure I'm glorified. And so Noah put himself in a disrespectful position. He's in such a drunken stupor that he's naked, laying in a cave. So when we go on to his son coming in there, verse 22, Ham, the father of Canaan, here it is again, right, the introduction, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. So instead of coming up on his father and say, what has he done, and covering him up, he lingers on the moment. And whatever he does, he goes out and he disrespects his father to his brothers. You gotta see the old stupid man in there. Go look at him. What an idiot. I mean, you can fill in the blank, right? This is opinion, everything I'm saying right here. But he's done something that shows the disrespect, and he's telling his brothers about it. And he didn't do. And you see that it's about respect, because when the two brothers come in, what do? They get a cloak and they turn away from him so that they don't look upon his nakedness, and they cover him up. They showed full respect for the father. What's the fifth commandment?
Honor thy father and mother.
Honor thy father and thy mother. And we see later on that it's mentioned, right, in Ephesians, there's a blessing with respecting, right? Children, obey your parents in all things. This is the first commandment, right, with a punishment attached. The disrespect to parents, it just leads down to disrespect in your society, disrespect toward God. And take a look. What do you see? Day in, day out. When you lose respect of authority, you lose respect of family, you lose respect of culture, you lose respect of authority, on all the way to the top. You see the results. It just bleeds at you day in, day out. I don't care if it's news, social media, or how you get your information from the world. Landra was 8? Yeah.
So God never said, only if your parents are godly do you respect them. He has to respect them no matter what they're like, because they're your parents. So he wants us to live godly and be right no matter what our parents do.
Yeah, and that's the next point with this. That's a great comment. So children and those that have children, and look, this isn't, hey, I'm going to respect my daddy, he's the greatest guy on earth. God has directed you to respect and honor your parents from God. The situation doesn't change once you understand your relationship with God and your respect for Him. It doesn't change on who they are. Yes, it's going to change. The behavior relationship will change, and the respect from how they treat you, that'll change. But we are always commanded. It's a commandment from God, and that's what He's saying, to honor your mother and your father. Go ahead, Art.
So, all the way up until this point before the flood, we saw how good it could be and how bad it could be with the garden and then the flood. You know, we had paradise in the garden, and then sin got so bad God had to destroy it all. But this reminds us that there's still going to be sin.
No.
Noah got drunk.
Yep.
Ham disrespected Noah. It also shows us that Noah wasn't perfect. And perhaps that played a part in this mocking that Ham showed. He's like, oh, look at the great man. You know, the man that God found favor in. You know, look how shameful he is.
Yeah, and we could suppose what it was, but exactly.
Right.
But it is a disrespect either way. Now, I feel obligated to show this next to you because there's a lot of connections to Leviticus chapter 20 in this context. So I just wanted to show you, I don't hold this view, but a lot of people do. And so I think we need to actually look at it. So when you're in your Bible studies and you're in your connections, let's go to Leviticus chapter 20. In Leviticus chapter 20, Moses being very nice and discreet, he knows this reading will be read to the congregation and children will be present. But he is talking about sexual sin in Leviticus chapter 20. And we could go to verse 20, that's kind of the heart of it. Someone just read that, and maybe I'll add a couple verses next to it. Go ahead, please. Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 17.
If a man takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a wicked thing. And they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, he shall never bear his guilt. He shall bear his guilt.
And just before that, it's talking about if a man has sex with an animal. It sounds horrible, it sounds horrifying, but it's going on. And people are wanting to marry their animals today. And nothing's new under the sun, right? So, and then the context right after that, right? During her sickness and uncover her nakedness. So it's an expression. To uncover their nakedness is to also have sexual relation with them. It's not just a viewing of and desiring, which could have been the case, right? With Ham looking in. But what seems to be the most is the disrespect that Ham was showing to his fathers as he told his brothers, based on their response, right? They come in so they wouldn't see his nakedness. They take the cloak and they cover him up. And so that would indicate that this is about disrespecting your parent. Either way, it's a total disrespect and a total disregard for the authority of the father and the respect of the father. And so I wanted to mention this, though. So the potential's there, right? The language is the same, certainly written to the law later. But the implications are that this was just a total disrespect for the father. And that's why the curse. But go ahead, JC. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I just saw a hand from the vertical here. Usually I'm seeing that little thing that's in my eye. All right. Okay, Dolly. Yes.
I've always had a hard time understanding why this was all put on Ham. So are there other circumstances, or is it just that it doesn't matter what the circumstances were? Ham should have covered his father instead of showing, letting his brothers know about it.
I think that's the sum of it all right there, Dolly. That shows you, you go through and you look at how strong the language is about children disrespecting parents, even a law that we don't know what was ever followed through, but even stoning in some cases, right, was written in the law. We don't have any examples that ever happened, but it was disrespect to the authority of the parents, disrespecting the parents.
I think you can make a practical application here too. When someone sins that we're aware of, we can go out and gossip about them and talk bad about them, or we can do the respectful thing and try to cover their nakedness. If you get what I'm saying metaphorically, go to that person and say, how can we fix this? How can we cover up this shame?
No, and that's I think that's the great point. This whole section is about pride, right? And that's the reflection on how we'll handle. It's great to beat up on people when they're down, right? They're easy to kick, they're easy to stomp on when they're down. But all through the Bible, we're told to pick them up and love them and respect them. Go ahead.
He could also have covered him himself
Yeah.
instead of going out and telling his brother.
Right. And that's what Dolly was just saying.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that would have been the right thing, right, to take it in. So, matter of the heart in this case. So it's interesting, and that the question kind of come up there. So we have this first prophecy in the Bible from man. God obviously prophesied things back in Genesis 3:15, the flood and what's going to happen, the seed of the seed. But here's the first prophecy from man. So it's interesting. Noah's not having a knee-jerk reaction. It doesn't look, at least to me, it doesn't look that way. Like, oh, Ham, what have you done? Right? He comes out and gives this prophecy, cursed is Canaan. Let's read this next section, 24 through 27.
And when Noah woke up from his stupor, he learned what Ham, his youngest son, had done. Then he cursed Canaan, the son of Ham, May Canaan be cursed, may he be the lowest of servants to his relatives. Then Noah said, may the Lord, the God of Shem, be blessed, and may Canaan be his servant.
Okay. So here's this prophecy. Isn't it interesting? Ham's the one that did, but Cain. So a son disrespecting the father, and then the son getting the curse of the father, which is kind of interesting. But this is prophetic. And we see this, if you're a Bible student, you see this unfold, right? As we go through the scriptures and we get into the Israelites, and we get into the nations. We're talking about a nation here when we say Canaan as well, right? The Canaanites. And I found something fascinating studying through this for me. And I hope I can share it as well with you. But so here's this curse that's going to Canaan. But also along with curses are blessings, right? So we see the blessing. It's easier for me to read it over here. Curses Canaan and the servants, who is servant of servants, his brethren. But blesses Shem, who's already in this great relationship with God. May Canaan be his servant. And then may God enlarge Japheth. And may he dwell in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be his servants. And so you see this connection going on in this prophecy. And as we study this, and I'm not going to spend, we could spend the rest of the class talking about this. But it's interesting, and I would encourage you to go through and study, because you're going to have to connect Genesis 9, 10, 11, and then further into Genesis 15 to connect all these. But when we melt this down, we dissect it, and you follow the descendants of Shem. And by the way, it wasn't all the Hamites, right, that received the curse. It's just the one son, Canaan, and then his nation that will follow. And so as you follow this down, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, this is how they break down. And you see in Genesis chapter 10, it gives their genealogy. And then chapter 11 is just like Genesis 1 and 2. Chapter 11 is reflecting back to chapter 10. It's saying, here's the genealogies, and now in chapter 11, this is what they did before they dispersed. That's what the beginning of chapter 11 is about. Chapter 10 is after the dispersion, when they went out. And so it's important to follow all this. So let's just take a second. Let me take your comment now, Mike, and then I'll come back to this.
Yeah, we see too that all through the Bible it shows that Canaanite people were cursed, they were looked down upon, and everything else. But Christ came along and he changed that. He gave a blessing and healing to a Canaanite woman. He also, if you look carefully in Matthew, one that's describing his apostles, it says Simon the Canaanite. So he had a Canaanite as an apostle.
Oh, no, yeah.
So Christ did away with that whole, these people are cursed, these people are blessed. We're all on even ground.
And you got to remember that Christ has Canaanite blood running through him, right? From whom? After that. So we'll play the guessing game with you. So we had some spies go to, there it is. Man, I got $1 for you. Yeah, Rahab, right? They went to Canaan. They're going to take these walls down. And a Canaanite, Rahab. And as you follow the genealogy, Rahab is in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And that's a great point. And Ruth, right? So you're right. I mean, but here's the curse. And so let's look at this. Shem. We're getting ready to study, Mr. Eric, a man called Abram. Abram comes from the genealogy of Shem, and as you trace that down, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? The rest of the Genesis, as we break these four characters down, the chapters get longer on each individual. And when we get there, we see the nation from Jacob, the Israelites. And so it unfolds. So back in 926, bless the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. Right? So we got that, but when you get over to chapter 10 and you see the conclusion, you can just follow these genealogies. And their dwelling place was from Mesha. This is where they ended up as you go towards Sephar in the mountain to the east. And so you can see where these people landed over into that land. And you can see further when you follow the genealogy who those people are, where they ended up. And they end up under the genealogy of Abram, Isaac, Jacob, all the way down to the Israelites. Go ahead, JC, and then we'll pick up the next guy.
To me, there's sort of a weak parallel to the blessing that Jacob and Esau received. And it makes you think that the patriarchs that were faithful to God, when they laid their hands on their children and blessed or cursed them, God carried that through for them.
Exactly. Yeah, and you've seen that. And so in the end, when we said this last year sometime, right? God loved Jacob but hated Esau. It was just figurative language of the prophecy that was being fulfilled. But once the prophecy was made, you just see how God takes it and it filters through. Now with Japheth, Genesis 9:27. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. So we see the relationship. Again, they're going to be over the Canaanites, and they'll be their servants. It's kind of interesting, though, in chapter 10, in verse 2 and verse 5, the sons of Japheth were these people, and he lists them. When you get down to verse 5, from these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles. So these, from Japheth, they ended up over in Europe in that way, and they became the coastline over in that way. And the Gentiles, us today. If this DNA could follow us back, we'd end up more into the Japheth line, right? With our DNA from these three that were coming. And so it's interesting how this curse and this blessing and this prophecy fulfills. And then we go over to Ham, and we see Canaan there. Again, not all of Ham's children, it was just Canaan. Of course, 9:25, we read that. Then chapter 10, verse 19, we see where these people ended up. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon and toward the Gerar. Let's go to Genesis 15 real quick. I don't have it up here, but this has come to me, and I think we need to just mention it real quick. I realize genealogy is not our favorite, but we got to understand the connection here, where we came from in our spiritual lives as well, which eventually all comes to Jesus Christ.
To me, genealogy is fine, it's just saying their name.
And that too, right? And also, this is beginning of verse 14 of Genesis 15. Also the nation whom they serve I will judge afterward. They will come out with great possessions. Moses is writing, they understand who the Canaanites are as he's writing this. And as we look at this, we'll realize these are descendants from Canaan. Verse 15, now as for you, you shall go to the fathers in peace, and you shall be buried at a good old age, referring to Abram. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. These Amorites are straight from the genealogy of Canaan. And they're the Canaanites, in the land of Canaan, the Canaanites. God has given them 400 years or something here in this prophecy, in this discussion, to repent. Where's his people at in the meantime? They're going to come back up and take the land. They're in Egypt. So here's this prophecy. Here's why. And in an old age, people are going to come back out. They're going to come up and they're going to take over this land. In about 400 years, as the people were calling out to God, he heard them. And they came out and they were commanded to go and take over the Canaanites through this whole text as we're reading here in Genesis 15. And so we can see where the Canaanites did become the servants. Now we don't have a whole lot with Japheth mentioned in the Old Testament, but again, when we go over to Ephesians, it talks about the Gentiles were included in. They were brought in, and so that's our connection back. But it's a beautiful picture here how Noah and his three sons, way back from Genesis, thy seed, the woman's seed, will bruise your seed, Satan's seed. And you can kind of see two paths begin there, right? Seth and Cain. You can kind of see how the seed of Satan would affect those people in the whole world, eventually become evil. You see it happening here again, and this traces down. But like we mentioned, Christ does bring all this back together and unifies. That's the mystery of the church. Go ahead.
So if you look at Mount Ararat, or the Fertile Crescent even, as kind of being the center of the world.
Right.
And you follow these genealogy tables, the best I can tell, Shem and his descendants headed east, instead in that general location.
Right.
Japheth and his descendants headed northwest, kind of north and then west. And then Ham and his descendants kind of Canaan and then south.
Right.
And so you can actually trace all the different ethnic groups by looking back at all these different people.
Yeah.
It's really interesting
No.
to do, and there are further studies you can pursue online
Yeah.
through apologetics and other studies.
Yeah, we could have spent another 4 weeks or so here.
Oh yeah,
No,
so
that's
it's really
a great
neat.
comment.
Yeah, I'm with Lander. It's
Yeah.
fun to study.
All right, so Back in 5:29, he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands." I keep forgetting you, Dave. "Because of the ground which the Lord has cursed." Go ahead, and then I'll follow
Well, I
up.
was
Good
going to
morning.
talk about this idea of proclivity. That means someone has this natural thing towards something. And God built each and every one of us in a different way. But you can be in the same family and you can have just total opposites in
Sure.
people.
Yeah.
And so you say to yourself, does this come through the soul or does it come through the mind and the body?
Mm-hmm.
Some are given to this and some are not. My youngest brother is totally anti-God. My older than me brother, because there's three of us in a row, had been toward Christ, but now he has fallen aside. And I think, how is it that I am still where I am? And was my proclivity different than theirs, or does the idea of faith allow God to have a change in us? And so I look at the whole thing with Noah and his sons, and I think to myself, did that come as a proclivity, or was their spirit within them what led them whatever the path that they took?
And grace is your answer, by the way. God's grace. Now, I don't know about the decision process. So Noah had this prophecy. We've seen it. He brought us through the flood. It was cleansed. And again, just back to, this is Noah's story, right? Genesis chapter 5, he just be concluded, and here's the story of Noah. They went and told the story of Noah. Now we're back to that biography of the people lived. They lived this long. They had these children, and then they died. And the last verse here in Genesis chapter 9, right here. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. So Noah would have seen Abraham too, which is interesting. Spent some time. I wonder if they got to connect there. All right, so Genesis chapter 1 through 11 is the beginning. This is before the patriarch fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And the rest of the book is going to cover those four. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Who am I missing? Joseph. And the last one was Joseph, that section. And you can see how that connects to God's chosen people. And you can see how God is working all this through his grace and through his promises and through his mercy to bring humanity a Savior to redeem us. So the picture really starts to unfold for us as we go forward. Eric's going to pick up, continuing with Abraham. Next week, we're going to do about 8 weeks worth. I scared him there. We'll see where he goes, and then we'll pick up. Okay. In the few minutes, I just wanted to review, right? So, creating. I didn't fix it on the original. I didn't fix it before I come back. So, chapters 1 through 11, right? Creation, the fall, the flood, the Tower of Babel, or Babel if you're English. Britain. New King James says Babel. History of the patriarchs, chapters 12 through 50. So that's what's going to follow here. Keep in mind, there's two major religions in the world. That's where our faith is built. One religion believes that maybe there's a microscopic dot with all this energy in it, and all this dirt, and the universe is pulled to it. And when you ask where the dirt come from, they don't know. Never seen it, don't know. But they keep adding millions to billions to trillions of years to try to justify it. That's a religion. That's where their heart and their soul believes. The other one is that there's a God that we don't know where he came from, but he created all this. And Genesis points out to us that God did create us, and we see that in Hebrews. Our faith believes that God spoke this world into existence. And we've seen evidence of that as we went through this, and we see the beauty that it's a relationship. This earth and soul is a personal relationship with a creator. And you can see it just unfold day in, day out in our lives. So that's the two major religions. It's a religion. And it is sad that religion gets to be taught in the books and the schools, and the true religion doesn't. But that's a battle that we just got to keep pushing for. Remember the day Yom, right? We studied that, the day Yom, 24-hour period. And I pray that you can come to that conclusion. I know it's not easy. It's going to take some diligence and some study and deeper research on your part. It's 7 literal days. And so we've got a young earth hitting somewhere in the 6,000 plus range right now. 2,000 just before the flood, 2,000 from that point, from Abraham to Christ, 2,000 where we're at. It's a young earth. And more evolution, not evolution, but discoveries and excavation, it continues to prove that. So But remember, we studied that word and how it meant in the Hebrew language, a literal 24-hour period. This is just a reflection again. We had the tale of the two trees, right? The tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Man is given choice. We need to choose God. God created us male and female. He showed Adam, look, Adam, what's missing here? That's why he took and brought animals. What's missing here? A mate for you. And blessed him with the most beautiful thing in the world. Humans are created for relationships. All humanity is created for relationships. And you see that. Why do you think social media is so big? Because there's relationships going on. Someone can like them like that, and you're liked. But as balance is, right, someone can dislike you too. But it's because humans are created for relationships. So our relationship is first with God, and then as wisdom has it with humanity, and that's the great commandments. Remember, sins have consequences, right? The serpent cursed to the ground. The snake itself would always be on its belly after that. Your head will be bruised. The woman's going to have sorrow of conception. And unfortunately, we discussed, she didn't have her first child until after this. But you will, your husband will rule over you. That was part of the commandment that came out of this. And Adam, you were told you will toil the cursed ground all the days of your life. And so outside the garden, he had to toil more, which is good. He learned to work more, but he was working in the garden as well. Then we've seen Cain and what happened, right? He left the presence of the Lord, went off to the place that now they call wandering. He started a family, and that family became the sons of men. And then that sons of men, meanwhile Seth was born, and Enoch came, and they were converted back to God. And so we've seen the sons of God. Sons of men and sons of God. The men were evil. God were still worshiping and following his line of authority. And then we've seen that when the two merged, that the sons of men won the battle, if you will. And the whole world became evil. We've seen the blood of Abel calling out. And I just reflected on that. And again, the second most tragic day. The first one when the fruit, the tree of good knowledge was taken from him. Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continuously. And we battle that every day. Not our hearts, but we're surrounded by the world whose thoughts are evil continuously. What do we always say? We're calling evil good and good evil. And it's just growing and growing as we keep displaying it. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. All right, I pray that your faith has been challenged. I pray that you've increased in your faith through this study. We've got some more faith building as we follow Abraham and his great faith as we go down this chapter. But thank you for your participation today and your time. I'll leave it on for you, brother.
Yes, I can.
Comment, how you doing?
Hey, guys.
Once again. Oh, thank you. And your input's always so good.
So interesting when you said there's two.
They do. I had somebody advance told me I just wished. That's unfortunate, right? Thank you for this teaching. Oh, you're teaching. That's religion too. They don't look at it. But you're right. It's one of my favorite meals right now. God, teaching. You don't believe that. Yeah, that's funny. I like that one. Oh yeah. Oh really? So that's where I learned to sing. I didn't know. Come to church, people were singing. No, I didn't know. I love Raymond. Never saw him in person. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I bet. Oh, yeah, he's something. He's something. I guess you know about it. Well, he was a backup singer for Elvis. Yeah. Oh, yeah.